I want to tell you about the last night I ever worked as a dispatcher at a truck stop off I-50. Because of what I found in Bay 4 at 3 a.m., I quit 2 days later, and I still sleep with the lights on. But to understand why that bay number still makes my chest tight, you need to know how it started. 3 weeks earlier, with a driver who wasn't supposed to exist. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that for about 2 years, I worked the graveyard shift at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where 18-wheelers roll in at midnight, drivers grab coffee and a shower, and by sunrise it's like they were never there. I liked the quiet. I liked the routine. Until the routine broke. It started small. Every trucker who parks overnight has to check in. Company name, plate number, hours logged. It's mostly a formality, but corporate makes us log it. One night, a man walked in wearing a company jacket I didn't recognize. No logo I could place. He gave me a company name, Red Line Freight, and I typed it in without thinking twice. Truckers come and go. That's the job. He didn't say much. Paid cash for coffee. Sat in the corner booth for almost an hour, just watching the parking lot through the window. I remember thinking it was strange, but truck stops attract strange people at 2 a.m. That's just how it is. He left before sunrise. I didn't think about him again until he came back 4 nights later. Same jacket, same booth, same silence. This time, I ran the plate number he'd given me through our system out of curiosity, the way you do when a slow night gets boring. Redline Freight didn't exist. Not in any trucking registry, not in any state database. The company he claimed to work for was a ghost. I told myself it was probably just an owner-operator running under an unregistered name. It happens more than you'd think. I let it go. He came back a 3rd time, and a 4th. Always alone. Always that same booth. Always watching the lot. By the 3rd week, I started noticing something that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just sitting by the window. He was watching one specific truck, a rig that belonged to a regular driver, a woman named Denise who ran the same route every 10 days, and always parked in Bay 4, the space closest to the building. I only put it together because Denise mentioned something to me one night, half joking. She said she felt like someone had been going through her cab. Nothing was missing, but things were moved. A phone charger unplugged and coiled differently. Her seat adjusted half an inch. Small things. The kind of thing you'd dismiss if you weren't already feeling uneasy. I didn't dismiss it, because I'd seen the man in the jacket walk past her rig more than once. Slow, like he was checking something. I told Denise what I'd noticed. She laughed it off at first, until I told her Redline Freight didn't exist in any system. Her face changed. She said she'd give a company like that a wide berth from now on, and she'd start locking her cab even during quick stops. For a week, nothing happened. The man didn't come back. Denise's route brought her through again, and she parked in Bay 4 like always. I remember feeling relieved. I thought maybe he'd just been some drifter who'd moved on. Then, at 2:40 in the morning, my radio lit up. It was Denise, and her voice wasn't right. Low, controlled, but shaking underneath it. She said, "Someone's outside my truck. He's just standing there, not moving." I told her to lock her doors and stay on the line. I looked out the front window toward Bay 4. Under the sodium lights, I could see a figure standing motionless beside her driver's door. Not knocking, not trying to handle, just standing there, facing the cab, like he was waiting for something. It was him, the jacket. The same stillness he'd had in that booth for weeks. I called the 2 other drivers parked overnight and asked them to walk out with me. We stepped outside together, and the second he saw us approaching, he didn't run. He just turned and walked, unhurried, almost calm, toward the tree line behind the lot, and disappeared into the dark, like he had somewhere specific to be. Denise didn't sleep in her cab again that night. She parked inside the fenced lot closer to the building and stayed in the break room until sunrise. We called the county sheriff, who took a report, but said there wasn't much they could do without a name, a plate, or a crime actually committed. Standing near a truck isn't illegal. I want to tell you it ended there. It didn't. 3 nights later, Denise's route brought her back through, and this time she asked me to walk her out to her rig before she left for her pre-dawn drive. It was routine now, We'd started doing it for every solo female driver on the overnight shift, just to be safe. We walked to Bay 4 together. Her truck was there, exactly where she parked it 8 hours earlier. Everything looked normal, until she opened the driver's side door, taped to the inside of her windshield. At eye level, right where she'd see it the second she sat down, was a photograph. It was her, getting into this exact truck, in this exact bay, taken from an angle that meant whoever took it had been standing close enough to see her face clearly. The photo wasn't old. She was wearing the same jacket she had on right now. Someone had been inside her locked cab, and they'd wanted her to know it. We called the sheriff again, and this time with physical evidence. They took it seriously. They pulled security footage from the lot's exterior cameras. Grainy, but enough. It showed the man in the jacket approaching her truck at 1 a.m. 3 separate nights, using something to bypass the lock without ever triggering the alarm. On the last night, the one where he left the photo, the footage showed him standing inside her cab for 11 minutes before stepping back out and locking it behind him, like he'd been sitting in her seat, waiting. Investigators ran the description and the jacket through their systems and got a hit. Not from Redline Freight, which still didn't exist, but from a name flagged in a different state entirely. A man with a restraining order filed against him 2 years earlier, from a woman he'd worked with at another trucking company. She'd left the industry entirely after he was fired for showing up at her home uninvited. Twice. And it had taken a judge's order to make him stop. He'd never stopped. He just found someone new to watch. They picked him up 4 days later at another truck stop, 3 states away, sitting in the same kind of corner booth, watching the same kind of woman. Denise changed her route after that. I heard she still drives, but never overnight, and never alone if she can help it. I quit the graveyard shift not long after, because every time I looked toward Bay 4, I kept picturing him standing there, patient, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. What still gets me isn't the photo, or the footage, or even the 11 minutes he spent sitting in her seat. It's that, in 2 years of working that lot, I checked in probably 1,000 drivers, and the only reason we ever found him is that he made one mistake. A company name that didn't exist. I think about how many bays, at how many truck stops, might have someone in the corner booth right now, watching, waiting for a name nobody thinks to check. If you drive overnight, or you know someone who does, lock your cab. Every time, even for 5 minutes, because some of the men watching you don't want your truck. They just want you to know they were there. I need to tell you about a guest who checked into room 214 and never checked out. Not really, even after he was gone. I worked the overnight front desk at a mid-size hotel for almost 3 years, and in that time, I learned that the scariest guests were never the loud ones. They were the quiet ones who watched everything. His name on the reservation was Daniel Cole. He checked in alone on a Tuesday night, paid for a week up front. Cash. That alone wasn't unusual. We get a lot of contractors and long-haul workers who prefer cash. What was unusual was that he asked for a room facing the parking lot, specifically one that overlooked the row where our long-term guests parked. When I told him we didn't guarantee specific rooms, he insisted and offered an extra $100 just to make it happen. I should have asked more questions. I didn't. For the first 2 nights, nothing seemed wrong. He came down for coffee around midnight, said maybe 3 words total, and went back up. Normal enough for a night owl. On the 3rd night, one of our long-term guests, a woman named Rachel who'd been staying with us for almost a month while her apartment was being renovated, came to the front desk looking pale. She said she'd woken up because she felt like someone was standing outside her door. When she checked the peephole, no one was there, but she said the hallway light outside her room had been unplugged from the wall. Not burnt out, unplugged. The cord just hanging there. I walked the hallway with her. She was right. The light fixture next to room 209, her room, had been deliberately switched off at the source. I plugged it back in and told her it was probably maintenance, though even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The next morning, I pulled the hallway camera footage, more out of curiosity than suspicion. At 2:47 a.m., the footage showed a man in a gray hoodie walking the hallway, stopping at the light fixture and unplugging it by hand. Then he walked directly to Rachel's door stood there for almost 4 full minutes without knocking, and walked away. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I recognized the way he walked. Slow, deliberate, like he had nowhere else to be. I checked the room assignment sheet. Room 214 was 3 doors down from Rachel's room. Same floor, same hallway. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I told Rachel to be careful, and I quietly flagged the room for extra attention on the overnight logs. For 2 nights, nothing happened. I started to think maybe I was wrong. Then, on the 5th night, Rachel came to the desk again, this time holding her phone with shaking hands. She said she'd found a folded piece of paper slid under her door sometime after midnight. On it were the words, "I know your schedule better than you do." That was it. 9 words, no name, no signature. We called the police that night. They took a report but told us, without security footage of someone actually entering the room or making a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do beyond noting it. Rachel asked to be moved to a different floor entirely, and we did it immediately. No charge. Here's the part that still bothers me. Room 214, the room Daniel had insisted on, the one overlooking the guest parking, didn't just face the lot. From that window, with the angle of the building, you could also see directly into the hallway window at the far end of Rachel's floor. He hadn't picked that room by accident. He'd picked it because it let him track her without ever needing to be in the hallway most nights. We changed Rachel's room, but we didn't kick Daniel out. Legally, we couldn't. Not without proof he'd done anything beyond unplug a hallway light, which technically wasn't even against hotel policy in a way that justified eviction. I hated that. I remember lying awake that whole day thinking about how close watching and waiting really are, and how the law only cares about one of them. 3 nights later, at almost 3 a.m., I was doing my usual walkthrough of the parking lot, checking that all the exterior doors were locked, when I saw Daniel standing near Rachel's old room's window, the one she'd been moved out of 2 days earlier, which was still unoccupied, just staring up at it, hands in his pockets, completely still. He didn't know I was there. I watched him for almost a full minute before he turned and walked back toward the building entrance. I went straight to his file and called the number on his reservation. Disconnected. I ran his ID number through our system, the same way I'd casually check anyone, and found something that made my stomach drop. The ID he'd checked in with had been reported lost 8 months earlier by a man who lived 4 states away and had never been anywhere near our city. Whoever Daniel Cole actually was, that wasn't his name. I called the police immediately and explained everything. The fake ID, the unplugged light, the note, the parking lot. This time, because of the false identification, they came out that same night. When they knocked on room 214, there was no answer. Housekeeping opened the door under police supervision. The room was empty of the man, but not empty of what he'd left behind. On the desk, arranged neatly, were printed photos, taken from a distance, of Rachel walking to her car, Rachel at the vending machine, Rachel through her old hallway window before the curtains had been closed. Dozens of them, organized by date, going back to her very first night in that hotel, weeks before he'd even checked in. He'd been watching her long before room 214. He'd just needed the right room to get closer. He was never caught. Whoever he really was, he'd walked out of that hotel sometime between my last patrol and the police knocking on his door. And he never used that identity, or any identity we could trace. Again, Rachel moved out entirely a week later, found a new place to stay for the rest of her renovation. I heard she still checks every hallway light before she goes to sleep, no matter where she is. I still work front desks, different hotel now, but every single guest who asks for a specific room for a reason that doesn't quite add up gets a second look from me now. Every time. Because some people don't check into a hotel to sleep. They check in to watch.